we have to talk about consciousness. Our life is actually a midpoint between the two deaths. To use the sexual energy in order to achieve enlightenment. The three-dimensional spiral shape encoded in our DNA, in our biology.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Discomfort-Zone podcast. I'm just checking out my levels. I think it sounds okay here. Welcome, one and all. Thank you for joining me. Oh good, I just clipped it there, so that's good. Great to see you here. We got a few people in chat. I'm not sure if that's a soft J or a hard J. Noj or Noj. Now I'm learning Portuguese, so they have a lot of soft J's here. Noj, Noz. So welcome, Breeze, Rondon, Gecko, and Avian Flu. Why, Avian Flu, why are you always above the bots? I always miss seeing you here. Anyway, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. We're back with a brand new episode, and to start it off, I'm going to segue nicely. For those who've noticed, either watching the video or I hope by the time this goes out on the podcast apps, you'll be able to see it there as well. And thank you very much, Rondon, for my very late timing with sending you the updated cover art, but you managed to get it in time. So thank you very much for that. As you can all see, I have updated the cover art for the podcast. I am extremely happy to announce and use this opportunity because it was actually made by a very gifted designer, artist, whose handle here is, and I'm going to butcher this, but bear with me, Pigslush Puff. I think it's like, anyway, that's what we're going to say with. But you can check it out with his Hive handle as well. He's on there, and show him some love. I'm going to read you that in the end because I'm looking for it now. But he is teamed up with Oriole, who I mentioned a few episodes ago. Oriole's a new podcast app that's, I think, in development now, is actually available. Is in alpha or beta, I'm not sure, but it's being developed. They very much appreciate any feedback, and you can download it now from the App Store. That's Aureal, Oriole, and it's a great place to listen to all of your podcasts. So Big Lash Puff, I'm hoping that's the pronunciation, has teamed up, and he is offering, I actually have to vouch for this to verify that there are still some places, because he was only doing it for a certain number of people. But if you're quick and there are still places available and you have a podcast, then you can get in touch with him, and he can make some new cover art for you as well. So I want to thank him very, very much for what he did. I love the new design. I must admit that it's very different from where I was, thinking about it. So, but I love it. I really love the take that he brought on it. So yeah, wonderful work, and you should check him out. His handle is, I'm going to spell it out, VRUSHALSHRAVANE. You could make that up. V Rush Al Shravane. Something like that. Anyway, I'll type it up here on chat, and you'll be able to see it as well. Thank you. Yes, amazing artwork. So thank you to all of you. What? The spelling, you mean? Sorry, I was reading on chat some of the comments, but yeah, I'll type out the name here, so it'll be a little bit easier. Yeah, anyway, check him out on Hive. You can follow him, and he's got some amazing artwork to see as well. So I just wanted to reciprocate and mention him, and thank him very much for the work that he has done. So Oriole, check it out. A new podcast app, definitely worth it. Okay, I don't know if you can tell, but this whole promotion and a lot of details of it, not really my strong suit. I'm very good at waffling on about very theoretical ideas. I'm not very good at the whole promoting certain events and stuff. But nonetheless, we'll move on. So following last week's episode, we were talking a little bit about various things off topic, but I felt that, not felt, I had sort of a few more things that I wanted to say that we didn't actually have time to finish. And I saw that the place that it had ended was a nice little sort of cut to the two ideas that I was thinking about. And so this week I wanted to carry on from the theme of last week, I should say. But if you didn't listen to the episode, don't worry, it stands alone as it is anyway. And I'd like to welcome, Krim and Frankie. Oh, and Abigail Honey, welcome to the chat. Thank you for joining. So, without any further delay, let's get started. So last week we spoke all about the narrative and this whole idea of all of our, beliefs and facts and perceptions, etc., are all part of our subjective narrative, and it's very hard with language and even science to reach any kind of something that's absolute and factual, in the sense that, not that it's not debatable, but its significance and whether that's where importance should lie. So it's not necessarily in whether something is right or wrong as it happens in the world, but much more so whether that is what we should be thinking about or what we should be looking at. And so this week I wanted to talk about an extension from that. And this is something I've noticed and sort of have been thinking about and mentioned a few times on the show, and I think we all experience it, and I'm struggling to name it, to give it some kind of words. So maybe you can help me if you've got any ideas in chat, or I can see it's on fire. But I'm calling it now. I wrote down the individual's revolution. And what I mean by this is, basically, if you look throughout history, and this is true, I think, to any kind of secret, ancient, untold, conspiratory, whatever history that you can think of, this level of freedom and this level of individualism doesn't seem to have existed in any time throughout history that I can tell. And for various reasons, and we don't have to go into the analytics of how we got here. Obviously, it has a lot to do with, our level of comfort and our ease of survival, and the level of freedom that we experience as middle class Westerners, such as myself, is not, the majority of people in the world, obviously. But nonetheless, I think that even regardless of some kind of financial state, there is a definite revolution in the individual's capabilities and the options that are now open to individuals. And so this is a subject that I've sort of been investigating, thinking about, and obviously, my life is a certain testament to this wave, this new idea that is come into creation over the last, I would say, probably 20 or 30 years, not much before. Probably the hippie revolution, in the 1960s, was a big instigator of, throwing off the shackles of society and chasing your own individual path. But nevertheless, that wasn't a societal shift as much. People were still very much adhering to the constraints of the individual, with the same, time-old tale of basically, the good of everyone. How do you say? All for one and one for all. But it's actually that for the good of the whole, the community is more important than the individual. There's a phrase I'm missing here. I can't remember exactly what it is. But that it's more important to sustain the whole at the expense of an individual's freedom. You do your part, you do your share. And this is very much the mentality in most societies today, I believe, statistically, sort of numbers speaking, and certainly throughout history. And this is indeed what was evolved in order to survive. It really was necessary because one person alone couldn't survive, quite literally and also sort of culturally speaking. But in today's world of the age of information, obviously with the internet and many things other than that, information is a big part of what frees people. information and maybe knowledge would be a closer term to what we're talking about. Education. When someone isn't aware of something, doesn't know something, they can't use those tools. But the more things we become aware of, and even no matter how impractical they may be, if we're studying a certain subject, the more we widen our horizon, the more we take in, the more it informs our whole worldview. And I'm really glossing over this because I assume that all of this is very conventional and understood by everyone, that education is a good thing, that information is power, right? Knowledge is power. So what does this all mean for us? Well, in relation to last week and the narrative, I think one of the places that we see this, obviously, we see it everywhere, but one of the places that I've noticed is within the field of art. If I didn't call it field, but the creative abilities to express oneself through art. And so this is twofold. Obviously, throughout history, there was always the starving artist. Artists from a very long time were only hired and paid to do work for someone else. And then there was obviously a time when artists could work for themselves, but obviously they very, very often couldn't devote as much time, maybe, and effort as they wanted to, because they had to survive and they didn't have much work, and most of them were, starving artists, as the cliche suggests. But today's world is the absolute opposite. In fact, in today, there's a lot of even bemoaning of the fact that so many people are creating art, because obviously and necessarily the quality of art diminishes. Now, this isn't necessarily, I think, because people are less talented today, but we were certainly much less aware of any other artists who weren't successful in history. But now every person who calls themselves an artist is accessible to anyone. So we're flooded with this tidal wave, unimaginable, of people producing art. And by art, I obviously am talking about everything that counts as any kind of creative expression. So this might be debatable, and I'm very much going to try and avoid any kind of definition of art, because to my knowledge, and as far as I can tell, it's really hard to categorize something as art. It's more a perception. You can perceive anything as art, as artistic, because art is inherently an audience, a participatory, art form. So if you don't have an audience, then it's very hard to define something as art, although that's also possible because anyone can be an audience, including the creator. But nevertheless, to try and avoid any kind of problem, we're going to categorize pretty much anything could be art. And so to take a real life example to put it down to what we're talking about here, when we think about vlogs, when we think about reaction videos, when we think about mashups, taking, I don't know if you know this, but taking various TikToks and editing them together into one 20-minute video of, 30-second clips. All of that is art. It might not be good art. It might not be entertaining. It might not even be watched by many people. But to put that video, into the world with the intent of showing it as some kind of creative expression, no matter what, how minimal it may be, by definition, we can definitely call that art. And this is something that really is very unique to today and has never existed throughout history. Most people who didn't have any talent, and certainly, even people who didn't have enough talent, couldn't afford to do anything they weren't good at. And so, this was obviously could be helpful in narrowing down the options and trying to decide what it is that you want to do. But it was definitely much more constricting, and whether or not the world is better off not knowing about all of these things, I think that there's something else underlying that could be interesting to look at. And I'm really trying. So okay, let me take a step here away from the negative side of this, abundance of freedom that we experience, and obviously is the more obvious phenomenon that people are talking about. and instead look at maybe a positive side to this same personal freedom that we've seen grow among us. And this is the side of this is this is a movement I believe. I'm not sure if I have mentioned it on this podcast before. I made a video recently for our YouTube channel talking about it. It's a movement that I heard about, I think 4 or 5 years ago, something like that, when I was just getting into electronics and what do you call it? Microcontrollers, the Arduinos. I forgot the name for a minute. And I came across this movement that calls themselves the Maker Movement. And if you've never heard of it, as its name implies, it's the whole movement of people today that can be seen in almost all fields, who are making things. And it doesn't matter if what they're making is sort of, software or hardware or, art or any kind of thing that can be created. I think most of the maker movement revolves around physical things of one kind of another, whether it's working with wood, stone, metal, or whether it is, robotics or whatever. But I mean it to include any creator, as it were. Anyone who creates anything, who makes anything. And this movement is well, if you've never experienced it before and it's interesting for you, I'd highly recommend just going down the rabbit hole of your choice. There really is an abundance of it in everywhere. Any field that interests you, or even is, just in any way you're curious about, there are people out there who are filming themselves, either learning from day one or, experienced masters who are sharing their secrets and knowledge. It's really unbelievable. And watching this, not only as I sort of first came across this, as we all do, I think, through tutorials, through trying to learn something new, like electronics, that's where I first came across coding and all of these subjects that were very, very far removed from me. I had no experience with them in my life. Suddenly became sort of, at least a little bit of light was shed on them. And obviously I'm far from being an expert in any subject. That's why I talk about everything, because there's nothing I know too much about. But I definitely learned more than I knew before. And it was watching these people that really sort of got me, as I think we all are today, into this idea that, well, if there's anything I want to learn, I can go and look for these people, these sort of very obscure, not famous, not celebrities, who are just putting out tutorials on whatever obscure, weird, fetish subject you're into now, like weaving or etching or whatever it is. And you can find it. And after, as I mentioned, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of going through, I don't know, thousands of hours of tutorials. I really do. That's my addiction. My addiction is sort of knowledge. I can just get into a subject and really research it and then go on to the next. And many people are like that. And I think today, when it's so easy, but it's, it feels like it might be too much sometimes. But over these last few years, I've definitely feel like I've made my way through the maker movement and experienced a large amount of it. Obviously, not everything, but I've seen a lot of lectures about it and people who are sort of celeb representatives, as it were. The people like who invented the Arduino or were part of that creation process, who talk about it as unleashing this power in the hands of the masses, basically opening up, microcontrollers, robotics, to everyone, to anyone who would want to build a robot for whatever reason, whether it's to, examples that I've seen, turn it on your coffee pot before you go downstairs, or whether it's to build a basketball hoop that you can't miss, wherever you shoot it actually moves to and gets it in. You can do it. And not only can you do it, but you as an individual, you without any other crew or people or, teachers or any other person, you can do it yourself. Obviously using the resources that are available, but that's not as it was once, when you would have to be an apprentice. You'd have to go to the specialist, the master, and live with them, or, at least train with them for years and years, because otherwise you couldn't get that knowledge. Now, granted, I will agree absolutely. There is a vast difference between someone who goes at the age of 6 and is an apprentice for a master, who has been doing this his entire life, and his, father and father's father were doing this. You can't compare that to watching YouTube tutorials and sort of mushing your way around and cutting corners and trying small projects and stopping them, and eventually coming to whatever level you get to. Clearly, these are not, replaceable. These are not equal. But we have to remember that for that, every one person who got to be an apprentice with their master, there were millions who were, farmers and just growing corn. And most people didn't have any opportunity. So the idea is we can't equal that level of education. But what we can do is we can open up sort of free passive education. And that allows any single individual not only to basically become, an expert in the field of their choice, but really have the freedom to explore any field that they want, and to even try out and invest whatever amount of time and energy they want to in any field without a good reason, and just, go down this rabbit hole of those peak productivity hours between 2 and 4 a.m. when you get the most done, and just, use that time for whatever you want. And this is, for me personally, this comes into practice in many different ways, and this whole maker movement signifies for me a change, a very big change, I think, in our human consciousness and our human culture, generally speaking, if we compare it to throughout history and see today as, in one way or another, an evolution from where we were. So, for those who don't know, my family and partner, are in the process of trying to build an eco village, and we have some land, and we're working on the land to create a self-sufficient environment, basically. And this includes many, many different skills. And as Darren O'Doherty says, the farmer is sort of the has to master all the trades, because they're all necessary for the work that you're doing. When you're a real homesteader, it sort of involves all of these different areas. And so, obviously learning and working on the land until now, it's been a very, very productive journey of working with wood and learning the whole process of taking a tree and making it, material that you can work with, and collecting rocks and a lot of different things. But within all of that, that's all very, the things that I do, obviously, very physical, very tactical. It really is learning a lot with your body, and maybe less so conceptually. Obviously, there's a part of it, but a lot of it is repetitive. A lot of it is not very complex or fine motion. For example, using rocks to build, or even, sawing wood, or digging in the earth. All of these are things, if any of you have experienced that, that take a long, long time when they're done by hand, not with machines, obviously. They take a long, long time and are very repetitive. They don't require a lot of mental energy in order to complete. And so for me, that's I categorize all of that work as in my Taoist practice. So if you can come and do a mundane, in a way, meaningless task like digging, or like cleaning, as they do in the monasteries, in the temples, then you really have to get into this place of Zen, where you're sort of letting go of all of your egotistical desires of wanting to stop and give up and be lazy and do something else and bored, etc., etc. You really are faced with it when you're trying to collect these rocks in the land and just carry them in a wheelbarrow. So that's the way I sort of perceive and deal with those things that need to be done. But there is another kind of creativity, obviously, which is those things were always open to everyone, but today technology has actually opened up an entire new vista of capabilities that really, to some extent weren't available throughout history, to my knowledge at least. I definitely worship the Tao as well. Sound wave, photon, and swoop and rondon. And so, as part of this, I mean, actually, the way that I got to this was as some of you know, I've spoken about last week. I consider myself an attempted trying to be a filmmaker. I like shooting films and editing them. So I wouldn't say that in any way I'm a successful filmmaker, but it's something that interests me, and it's something that I'm studying and learning much more than I'm actually doing. I think this is because also I'm more interested in sort of understanding the art form rather than actually being, commercially successful in any way. So within that, there's this whole field which is sort of started, years ago, and is now in a whole new world, which is VFX, visual effects, basically. And obviously, I assume we all know about this: green screens and deep fakes, and all of today's, nothing can be trusted. And this all ties in very nicely with our idea again of narrative, where if once we believed that watching the news was watching something objective and real, or whereas, if you saw a picture of something, there was no thought that it might not be true. A picture was proof. If you needed proof, you took a picture. If you wanted to catch the criminal, you caught them on camera. Nowadays, in our generation, I hope, at least more and more, people are no longer sort of falling for that, quote unquote. Just because something is filmed on video has no guarantee that it's actually true. And today, even the absolute specialists who, once could sort of go over fake art pieces and be able to exactly see where it was stitched together, or discover whether something is true or not under investigation. With computers, this is becoming harder and harder to do, and with computers actually taking on video editing in the sense of what we call photoshopping today, which is funny that that's become a verb. Manipulating data to make it appear as something else, it's actually getting harder and harder to see, to spot. And so this is also something that I'm very interested in. And within my field, I've become very interested in, again, this tool as being used to express my creativity. And so within filmmaking, one of the obvious constrictions to any individual and for people trying to compete in any way with the big studios was obviously the budget, which goes into, the vast crews and location and everything to support that, etc., etc. And with the visual effects, this is actually opening up a new avenue for creators where, first of all, already in the world of animation, there are people, not many, but some, who are sort of creating these masterpieces, really equivalent with any, high production value company out there, and creating this entire, film themselves on a home computer with, software that they could get. And this is absolutely unbelievable, specifically within the realm of filmmaking. Although again, there's relations to this in many different forms. But if it comes to the different arts like plastic arts, it's still very hard to free people from the need to sort of buy the supplies and use them themselves, and it'll cost whatever it'll cost. And that was more or less the same throughout history, as it were. But when it comes to the digital age, this technology now is no longer sort of, you don't have to keep paying to use it because it's software. So it can be used however you see. And the better the software becomes, the more creative freedom you have as an individual. So instead of having to, as it was once, go and manually by hand have to do something and therefore have to learn the technical prowess to be able to do it, the digital revolution, the computers are actually replacing a lot of the need for, manual labor and actually freeing you up as a creator. And so because of this, I decided that what I'd really like to do is start learning a free piece of software, which I will just very quickly mention. I have no idea who would be interested or not, but it's absolutely amazing if you haven't heard of it, called Blender. And it's a free open source, one of the first open source, and certainly one of the biggest open source softwares out there, which means that they've got a lot of very, very advanced things that their community are developing for them. So it's an amazing piece of software. If you've never heard of it, it originally is a 3D modeling software. So you can use it to create 3D models. But within that, it's now, developed into it can handle a lot of different tasks. So it comes with, the built-in renderer and compositor, and it can handle VFX, and it has, motion capture and motion tracking, and, building 3D virtual sets. If any of this is, you've no idea what I'm talking about, I apologize. But basically, a lot of options that used to require many, many different softwares and each costing a lot of money. All of this is now available in one bundle, in one program that in itself is free. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can pay for in addition with the software. You can buy different add-ons and plugins and models. But if you were in a situation where you just wanted to try and you had no money or you didn't want to pay any money, then it's absolutely free. And so I've been dabbling in this, and I'll just give you an example because it's very cool. But I'm not sure if you will agree as much as I, but in my work, I deal a lot with, in general with the eco village, with land design, farm design, seeing the shape of the land, a lot of these different things. And for the longest time, I was looking for an elevation map of the area of our land. And there's a few things available, and you can buy things here, and you can find some resources online, but there was nothing, really good for what I wanted. And then I found Blender. Within Blender, and this is after literally years, I found that someone had created an add-on, a plugin, that allows you to take a piece, any part of Google Earth's satellite images, and convert it into a 3D model of that piece of land, of that terrain. Or I think it works actually in cities as well and everything. I've never actually tried it on buildings. I've only done it on pieces of land. But this is incredible. I mean, if you take a moment to think about this, maybe it's not as incredible for those who aren't in it, but you can now have a 3D model for absolutely free within about 2 minutes, depending on your computer power, less probably, a 3D model of a piece of ground that you can then obviously edit and add and do whatever you want, but as it is, as an add-on, just for free. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And with that, then you can do obviously a lot of other things, and you can. It's funny because for me, this tool for land design is incredible because now you don't have to work with elevation maps. You don't have to work with 2D maps that are, much less intuitive to visualize. You can actually work with a 3-dimensional space where you can see the relation in the heights, and obviously you can measure everything accurately, and you can use the model for its exactness and its preciseness. But you can intuitively just have a look and turn the camera here and there, and you can animate flying through the scenery, and you can do all of these things really for free, which you never could be able to do before. And so all of the tutorials that I've seen about this are for 3D artists and different game developers for creating terrain for their games or for their sceneries. If you want to make a realistic looking mountain range, why not just take one from Google Earth and you can import it then? Which is just funny for me because it seems to me, something that's obviously very nice, but there's also other tools you could use to generate, random natural looking mountains. Whereas to be able to take the terrain without even, a 2-hour drone flying through and just take it from the satellite images and start fresh within 2 minutes is unbelievable. So anyway, that's something that changed my life, but it's probably not as transferable. But the idea is the same, that this software that's now available for everyone, for those who are listening, Blender, can do some very amazing things, whether it's for me, in my sort of professional work, but also in the creative side, whether it's in filmmaking in general or in 3D modeling. And when you get to this isn't exact because Blender isn't designed, I think, for 3D printing, but I'm pretty sure you can work with it. You just have to convert it as you send it to the software. You can use Blender to model something and then have a 3D printer create it. And this is amazing for not only artistic, obviously, value, but most of the work that I've seen personally was in, engineering. And now if you're an engineer and you want to design, you can print, all of your different designs in much, much less time than would have taken without you having to even be there and come and test them and see and learn and, redesign it again, etc., etc. So this is an amazing, again, enhancing the freedom of an individual where you don't need a lab or, you don't need to go and rent one. You don't need too much expensive machinery and tools to make all of these things. And you don't need a team or you don't need financing. You can do this in between your work, as many people are. And if you upload it to YouTube or find some other way to monetize your, teaching and your showing of the progress, then you can actually be, as it were, financed by your audience who are, who feel they're getting something out of it. So this in and itself is responsible, as we can see, to this huge explosion in creators that never has been, I think, before as much. Definitely not in terms of sort of passion creators, what you could call them, not people who are producing in order to earn with their wages, but actually people who, on top of their work or whatever, have decided to sort of take a leap of faith or try it or even do it just for fun, like this podcast, and decided to create because they want to and not for any other reason. So within all of this, I can see that I'm once again coming close to the the end of the show. I haven't got through everything, but I'm going to try and wrap it up a little bit. You know what? Before I move forward, actually, let me just go through chat very, very quickly. Oh, okay. There's a lot of jokes here and there. Nice. I don't think there's anything too crucial. If you did send a message and I missed it and I haven't, then please resend it, and I'll try and see it. Yes, a lot of Blender jokes. I have to tell you, talking about Blender jokes. Never mind. There's a guy who has a very famous Blender channel, and then his latest video has been just a Blender tutorial of how to blend things in a smoothie. So yeah, it was funny. But I actually wanted to talk about one other thing before I go. And within all of this, obviously there's the whole side of software freeing people, and a big part of that today, I think, is AI. And with AI, this is again another very big revolution. I think none of us can really fully grasp the implications of what this will mean in 20 or 30 years. It could go either anyway. It could be a dead end, or nothing moves forward, or self-destructs or whatever, and it could take over in a Terminator style, and anything within that gamut is possible. I believe it's hard to say, but what we do know is what's happening right now. And what's happening right now, as far as I can tell, not talking about any kind of dark demonic uses, is that it really is helping people with software. So AI, whatever you want to call them, deep learning algorithms, whatever, are able to come and sort of do these tasks that were previously really impossible to a certain extent. And so I don't know if you've seen some examples of these, but the deep fakes that have been cropping up, I think it's already a year old or something, but I just watched another one today. And it's obviously another stick into this idea of absolute truth, where now if I'm watching an interview with someone, I shouldn't be thinking of it as I'm judging this person by what they're saying, but it really should be viewed more in its entertainment value, as we view other things that we know are unreal. But regardless of AI, there's this whole world of computer science and coding, which obviously utilizing artificial intelligence within that is taking it to the next level. But even just within that world of coding, before you reach that level of AI, people have some very incredible things that they are doing today. There's one YouTube channel. In fact, I actually wanted to mention this because I just saw it before this show. And it really was very interesting. It's a guy I've been following on YouTube. He's called, I can't remember the name of the YouTube. I'll check it out now. But it's the name of his series is called Coding Adventure. And I don't know how many of you watch many coding videos. I assume they're not many, so I will try and keep this as as interesting as possible. Anyway, his name is Sebastian Lague. Lague, I think so. Lague. And anyway, if you're interested, check him out. But what he does is he works with code, with C sharp, I think, or C++, in order to create digital art in a way, or 3D models and 3D environments and sceneries. And he also implements these things within sort of games that he makes. And I think his sort of one of his earlier passions was really, I think, the gaming. But what he does is a coding adventure. He experiments with writing these different codes. And so, for example, I'll just give you a few things that to understand. He writes these codes that are supposed to visually simulate certain things. So, for example, you can simulate fractals, if any of you have seen, or these, very interesting geometric shapes and animations that go through them. These sort of dissolving shapes into one another, etc., etc. But this last video that I saw was actually where he was attempting to simulate an ant colony's behavior, which, if you've heard this show for long enough, you'll know I'm a very big fan of ants. I think ant colonies are one of the most interesting organisms that we have, and it was it was very educational to watch this, because what came about it again, which is something that again comes to us, I think that I've spoken about before. In order to reach a ant colony-like behavior, you actually don't write very, very complex code. The idea being that very complex systems are actually derived from rather simple sort of basic rules. And utilizing those simple basic rules lead to unexpected and sometimes complex results in the future. So one of the very, one of the subjects that I'm passionate about, one of the examples of this is the game of Go, which is a very, very simple game in terms of the rules, especially if you compare it to its other, half, as it were. But the chess, every piece moves the same. Once a piece is placed, it can't be moved. So it's a very, very simple guideline, simple set of rules that lead to these tremendously intricate and complex patterns. And again, when he was attempting to, and I think succeeding in a way, code some kind of ant colony, the rules that he was using in order to get there were very, very simple things of, like, motion, what dictates which way the ants will go, etc., etc. And then he would sort of let the simulation run, which is what the computer part of it is. And you watch as he doesn't know what will happen, you don't know what will happen, but the computer simulates given the rules that he gave it. And it was very interesting to see this, and it blew my mind. Now, the second half of the video, he was attempting to simulate slime. And there, I think, I wasn't as impressed, I have to admit. Maybe it's because I have quite high standards when it comes to slime. If I have mentioned it before, I'm pretty sure, but there's the experiment, the very famous experiment. If you haven't heard of it, you should really go check it out. It was a slime that was put into a maze and given food at one end, and it was sort of used to determine what the shortest path, to different food sources would be, and then using those techniques to sort of design the road system that would connect different major cities in Japan. So it's in the field of biomimicry, and if you haven't heard it, just look up slime experiment maze and you'll find it. And so there you can see the slime's movement, and you can see this unbelievably efficient organism and the way that it's evolved. And I think when he was attempting to mimic that, he didn't do as good a job personally. But nonetheless, the ant colony was very impressive, the utilization. And again, this is one guy. This isn't a professor. He might have a degree, but he's not being paid to do this. And he's really, I mean, even with YouTube and I've watched it, he's not getting much out of it. I'm pretty sure he really is doing it because he wants to learn these things. He's experimenting himself, and then he puts in all of the time and effort, which I know go into it, to edit them very, very nicely, and it's high production value. And he really, he's a good visual artist in more ways than one. And it's incredible to think that one guy will go and design this new code, because I watch a lot of coders, and most coders, not in a bad way, but if you're coding something, especially if it's something big, you take code that's already there. You go to everyone else and you take everything that works, and then you try and jumble it all together, and eventually you make it work. But that's what I think today, at least 70 or 80% of coders do from what I see. This guy had a piece of code that he had written years before, and he didn't like it, so he decided to rewrite a completely new piece of code for this project, even though he could have used it. And that's the kind of guy he is. But nonetheless, he has the tools, the technological tools available to him, and the capability to come and write a piece of software that can simulate an ant colony. And obviously, he did research the subject. He looked up many other people who had written this kind of thing. He did take small pieces of code, for certain functions. So obviously, this is not a one-man inventing everything from scratch. That's never the case. But compared to if I were to do this, so I think most people, he really was doing this process from start to finish by himself, and showing the extent of what the combination of the age of information, the internet, people sharing all of this, and the technological advances, not only in their capabilities, but also in the production technologies, which are making it available for us, which are lowering the costs and making it more accessible to, obviously not everyone in the world, but many, many more people than it used to be. All of this is, again, freeing us on an individual level to a place where it never really was possible before. Now, I feel that with a few minutes that I've got left here, I just want to give a sort of counter, as it were, which is, I obviously am striving towards a minimalist lifestyle, a natural lifestyle where I'm spending most of my time outdoors in nature, utilizing my body. For me, that seems to be the optimal state that I can be in, although I'm very far from that right now. But that's what I strive to do. That's what I'm trying to do with my life. And so how can I be, I think a lot of the people like me, people I meet here, people with farms, people who are working, don't learn Blender and don't watch coding videos. And I think many of them, well, maybe I wouldn't categorize them quite, but leaning towards a certain, technophobia, a certain belief that this technology and this, industrial age is a big part of the problem. And that if we want to be more natural, we have to sort of give up or eliminate this side of things. And again, I don't want to put words in anyone, but this is a general sentiment that I feel, and I can certainly relate to some of it myself. And I do feel that the way that we do things now, the industrial, or I should say the industrious methods, are obviously out of balance and not sustainable, let alone regenerative. However, I really don't think that we need to, roll back the clocks to the Stone Age or whatever it is. I am personally absolutely, passionate about these technologies and the technological developments that we see coming through. And again, I'm using this in many different fields in my life, from being able to design a farm to writing and directing and trying to do the VFX for my short film. So I'm a big proponent of it. I do believe that the way that things are done today, this kind of completely wasteful way of thinking, where we can just take whatever we want without any kind of consequences, isn't what's going to work in the long run. And I do think that should change. But I do believe that the levels of freedom that we've secured utilizing these technologies and utilizing what humanity has been able to achieve are something that we should definitely not give up easily, because it's with these new technologies that I think people are learning more and more to create their own narrative. And this is, I think, the biggest accomplishment that we should be striving for, because the more people who create their own narrative, the more freedom will actually be. And the more free people are, the less willing they are to give that freedom up. And so I think this really does all tie in together. There's a lot of words that we can put up to this, are you a follower or a leader, etc., etc. But I think that it's much more simplistic than that. If we look at children, we can see it very clearly. Children are often denied any kind of independence, at least at a younger age. And this often leads to frustration and an inability for them to really relate to what they're being told to do. And if we instead, as I personally feel with many children, not that you should allow children to do whatever they want, not at all. There are definitely rules, but you should encourage and try and grow that independence as much as possible, because that independence will actually serve in future much, much more than, any kind of constriction that we're trying to impose, as we often see with children who've had, these kind of things. And so on a much larger scale, as I believe that society should definitely be thought of as children being educated, especially in today's age, I really think that if we, again, try to encourage this independence with people, not to act selfishly, but to think independently and to think not outside of someone else, not to shut out any other opinion, but to be exposed to more and more opinions and actually to be able to discern different opinions. That feels for me the direction that I would like to go. And I think a big part of that, at least throughout history, we've seen comes with technology, where if I'm forced to be a farmer and go, from my house to the land and sell it to one, I never have time to think about these things. And with today's, obviously, again, comfortable situation that very few people on Earth are exposed to, but even with the iPhone, if you can watch what life is like in another country, you're already being exposed to much more, which is why certain countries don't want that internet to be free, obviously. But nevertheless, for our personal lives and for those we love around us, I think if we can take this whole revolution that no one is really sure of what's going on with it, in terms of everything exploding so quickly that no one really has it under control. If it's not one thing, it's the other. And the Walmart, where they sold, what was it, Robin Hood? We're all kind of winging it at this point. Politicians, media spokesmen, like everyone acts as if they know. Nobody knows. I don't know, and I certainly act like I know. We should all act like we know. And we should all really believe that, because we all know our personal narrative. We know it so we can change it. We know it so we can adapt it. We know it so we can decide how we want it to be. And if we focus on that and focus on, what narrative we want to live by and to see the world, and less anxious about other people's narratives that aren't, aligned with ours, I think humanity in general, once it becomes freer and more independent and able to relax, because people feel that they have a place that they can express themselves, that their needs, emotional needs are met in that sense, I think people will be much nicer and much more calm. This is my personal experience. I obviously would be interested to see. I don't know, but I'd hate for us to have to go back to a time when everyone had to work exceedingly hard just to survive. And I that's what I personally hope for all of us, that we can be freed by whatever means, technological or otherwise, to express ourselves both creatively and, generally speaking, emotionally, and be able to feel that we have something to say and some place to say it. Okay, I think I'm going to end on that very odd note, but thank you so much, Frankie. Thank you. Yes, I haven't been on chat at all. So Joe Biden support. Well, let me just get it out there very quickly, because if we're talking about politics, I do have one thing to say, and that is that I don't even know how to say it in a nice soundbite. There's a great one. If voting made a difference, they'd make it illegal. I think that's how it goes. Right now, if you know, in Israel, there's been another election and Bibi was voted again. I just heard this today, so it's just funny. It's very funny. Okay. Olive, in a phase 3 type civilization, there is no money and people just do what they enjoy. Exactly. And, this may seem absolute utopia, but I really believe that with the knowledge that we have in regenerative agriculture, and I've spoken about this many, many times, this is what I based my life on. So we'll see if I'm right. I hope I am. But, if you can passively collect your rainwater, have food, shelter, etc., at least with a minimum amount of work input, then yeah, what do you do with yourself? And there seems to be this belief that if people are left to their own vices, they just will lounge about and do nothing. And I grant that will probably be a certain transition phase, but honestly, eventually, people want to create. I mean, they might not be aware that they can. They might not even think of it as an option. I think most people I know, once they reach their sort of 20s or 30s, feel like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I do. I can't draw. I can't play an instrument. I can't write code. I can't blah, 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 whatever. And it's a very narrowing way of thinking about these things, because what would be more accurate to say, I can't yet. I'm a testament that although I don't do any of these things well, I can do a lot of things. And it's not about doing it well. It's about what interests you. So, okay, I can see. Oh, sorry. Olev, then JP, Joe Biden. No, JP is the Jewish Power Hours of MSP. Wait. Nice. Wait, but permaculture sustainable lifestyles, you can lounge around, you produce your food and energy. You can't lounge around, you produce your food and energy. Well, that's why I mean passively. So by producing energy and producing food, we actually don't produce food. The earth produces food, or plants produce food. We're talking about meat and vegan, etc., but most of it, let's say, and if you were gearing your lifestyle in that way, and obviously what I'm suggesting, wow, this is so off topic, but I'll just mention it because I have to. We're near the end of the show anyway, so it's okay. I spoke about this first few episodes, but no. It doesn't take as much work as 60 hours. Oh, you're not. Yeah, it doesn't take. Yes, exactly. And I think we can lower the number of hours you need to work much, much lower, because if you have a, maintenance-less food forest, and your shelter and, your water being captured, etc., and if all of these things are basically passive and require maintenance, every once in a while, then you really should be able to free up the vast majority of your hours, minus the time that it takes you to basically gather and then process. And so for various things, processing can take a different amount of time. But for me, I really want to get into the grazing lifestyle, which is you go out and you eat from the bush. And this isn't just cutting out all the time of preparation and cooking and all of that. But it's also all of the, dishes and washing and drying. And, there's a lot of things that you can do to actually cut a lot of that time. Okay, grazing is an excellent way. That's how animals do it. And if you've got a food forest, then it's designed for that. Anyway, that's a little bit off topic, but I can see that we're coming to the end. Next is avian flu. I can see that you're here with post up, so please stay tuned for that. All of you in chat, oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it, my babbling nonetheless. I've been Olev. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you, and I hope I see you all next week for another episode. Until then, have a good one.